procrastination, the dreaded beach ball, and hard crashes can be the stuff of nightmares. And many artists take them as just another part of creative life that occasionally, or in some cases often, interrupt flow. But that doesn't have to be the case. Today I'm going to tell you about my twist on a classic technique that has been keeping me focused and my work backed up for years so I could stress less and create more. Let's get into it. My method is built off the Pomodoro technique, and if you know the basics, you may want to skip ahead to this timestamp and learn what kind of tools I layer on top for my creative work. But for those that are uninitiated, it's a classic productivity method to not only get work done when you don't feel like it, but also make sure that you don't work on the same thing all day, leading to diminishing returns. And I've been using Pomodoro for years to great success, whether it's in my drawing, design, video work, or even writing the scripts for these videos. Traditionally, the way people use Pomodoro is by setting a timer for 25 minutes to focus on work and then giving yourself a 5-minute break. And what I found is that whether I have a busy schedule or I'm just not motivated, Pomodoro really forces you to get to work because you know you only have a 25-minute clock. But once you do find yourself in a state of flow, Pomodoro allows you to block out your time in a little bit more easy to digest chunks, which helps with diminishing returns, and the 5-minute break has many practical health benefits, both of which I'll cover later in the video. Anyways, there are a ton of ways to get started integrating Pomodoro into your workflow, from analog options like hourglasses or kitchen timers to digital apps and the like. My twist on this technique that ensures consistent backup is often secretly built into the creative software you're already using. Nowadays, more and more software has automatically built-in autosave functionality, but what you might not realize is you can customize how often the backups occur. If you go into the menus and set the backup time for 25 minutes, whenever you get an autosave pop-up like this, you know it's time for a quick break, and you can rest easy knowing your work is saved. Since using this technique, I've avoided overwhelming myself, but also heartbreaking setbacks on all kinds of projects. Even when editing this video, I experienced a crash, but thankfully my progress was protected. Saved is not to be confused with a hard backup though, and so after a few sessions, I try to make a backup on an external drive or a cloud service before moving on to other tasks or stopping for the day. Multiple Pomodoro sessions gives me clarity and a system to not only engage with creative work, but make sure that all of that time doesn't go to waste. And speaking of multiple Pomodoro sessions, another great aspect of this technique is time management. If you find yourself consistently working on the same project for too long, becoming a perfectionist, or afraid to publish something, try limiting yourself to a certain number of Pomodoro sessions. Say 4 sessions, which equals 2 hours, and blocking that out on your calendar. Now, this still requires a little bit of discipline on the user, but I found that it's a great way to limit myself so that I'm not hitting diminishing returns or having these other perfectionist tendencies come up in my work. While everyone works differently, creative projects will inevitably leave artists vulnerable to all kinds of emotional responses. We might be afraid of the blank page, but then find a burst of creativity when we hit our stride after 30 minutes, only to question our choices during a binge session the next day when we wake up with fresh eyes. As I've talked about in the past, creative work benefits from systems to keep us responsible and consistent. Otherwise, it's easy to procrastinate or put too much time into one area of work and neglect others. Setting up this routine where you do a certain amount of Pomodoro sessions and then taking a slightly longer break and coming back to other work has been a great way for me to stay productive, working on multiple projects in different disciplines. And talking about those constant breaks, I found that implementing the Pomodoro technique into my workflow has helped significantly not only with my physical health, but also my mental health. Working without consistent breaks on the computer can lead to a myriad of health issues, from neck and back pain to wrist strain or eye fatigue. Everyone's setup and situation is going to be a bit different here, and when it comes to your health, you should always do your own research and consult a professional wherever possible, but from my experience, it doesn't even take 5 minutes to keep yourself in good working order. In my breaks, I typically do anything from push-ups or push-up variants to wall sits. This is not going to be a full workout session, just enough to counteract the repetitive movements we often do on the computer that can lead to injuries over time. When I'm in a flow state and I want to be quick, some simple wrist stretches work wonders. Then I look out a window at the horizon to have a change of pace from the close-up screens that I use constantly, and found it recommended that for every 20 minutes of work on a computer to look 20 feet away for 20 seconds. Of course, we could make this more Pomodoro friendly by saying 25 minutes of work to look out 25 feet away for 25 seconds. You could also take a 5-minute walk around the block to get moving and looking at something other than a screen. 2 birds with 1 stone. This has been my workflow for years at a standing desk, which feels easier to build healthy habits as there's less friction in getting started or walking away. but I think this is particularly helpful for those that work at a seated desk, where there's a lot more friction involved with getting up and taking a break, and you might find yourself easily scrolling YouTube or Instagram in a 5-minute break instead of going out and getting some exercise, which means that you're going to be less focused on your work when you do return from a break session. And of course, you'll get the same physical health benefits I mentioned earlier if you're sticking with like a short exercise routine. But beyond the physical health benefits, I've actually found that Pomodoro has a significant effect on the way that I look at my work and my mental health when I'm doing creative work, and especially when it comes to multiple session projects. What I found is that oftentimes in your first 1 or 2 sessions, or your first hour of work, it's very easy to get into a flow state and really enjoy what you're doing, which is great. But then if you start to ignore Pomodoro and slip back into a regular just 5-hour straight workflow, not only do you hit those diminishing returns, but I found that my mental health can be very swingy in those moments when it comes to creative projects. Efficiency and objectivity go down over time, and everyone knows the feeling of seeing their work with fresh eyes the next day, cursing their choices, or even wanting to fix mistakes, wasting more time, and getting down on yourself. So while stopping at the peak of your day might seem a bit backwards and incur some resistance at first, it can often help your work and mental health in the long run. I also want to mention here that these breaks are not times to be productive on other tasks or scroll social media. Life is already challenging enough, and it's easy to compare yourself or feel overwhelmed by endless to-do lists. But beyond the stress and anxiety this can cause, in the background, task switching incurs a loss of time and focus. And while the allure of checking off some boxes on the to-do list might be strong for hyper-productive types that are drawn to Pomodoro, I've actually found these breaks are often where I come up with some great ideas, similar to what you might experience in the shower or while driving. So taking breaks like this can definitely keep you more objective about your creative work, and overall Pomodoro gives you a system to consistently engage with art in a healthier way, and I hope you'll take into consideration what I've been doing with the autosave functionality. That being said, and at the end of the day, Pomodoro is a tool for creative and productivity needs of all kinds of different people. So it's not really a one-size-fits-all strategy, and I've heard different people do things from 50-minute work to 10-minute breaks, and everything in between, so feel free to customize it to your liking. What I really like about the autosave version of the Pomodoro technique is how low friction it is. If you really find yourself in a state of flow that you don't want to tear yourself away from the computer, it's very easy to stay engaged and work for another session. And then if you want to, say, do a more regimented approach where you're working in certain blocks of time, it's also easy to set that up or get back into. So anyways, I hope you found the video interesting or informative and have some practical takeaways that you could integrate into your own workflow. Let me know in the comments if you have something else that you think could stack really well on top of this to make it even better. And as always, thank you so much for watching.